Thank you for joining. This is the last session before the beer, and I hope it will be a shorter session. I will try to bring in the topic of data science, and I will have some samples and also some demos with me and some customer examples. So it will be a mixture of a little bit theoretical background combined with practical samples from customers and also some demos. So some words about me. My name is Marcel Franke. I'm from Germany. I'm from a consulting company called PM1. So we are a German BI provider for Microsoft BI and analytics in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And I have a more or less 10-year background in data warehousing with SQL Server. And since 1.5 years, I'm more focusing on data analytics. And this is the reason why I choose this topic. I have also a blog, and most of the things that I'm talking here about and also about customer results you can find also there. So what is data science? So first of all, I'd like to start with the definition of the methodology of data science, which is a very complex one. I think everybody heard already about. It's very famous since some months in the press. And you can read a lot about data scientists, the sexiest job in the world. People call it like this. And when you have a look at the definition, you find this is a mixture of mathematics, statistics, data engineering, but we also find data warehousing in there. So it's a combination of data analytics, we have statistics in there, so very complex thing. And the most important thing is, what do we want to do with this? And it's extracting meaning from the data. That's what it's all about. And when we have a look at data science, I first like to go a little bit into history and see where does data science come from. So what do we do with this? It's not a new topic. It's there a while. And when you do some research about data science, you stumble around gambling. And this is where everything started. It started with gambling. So games of chances. And gambling is also not a new thing. So gambling is exists since 3000 before Christus, right? And the first games were played with dice made of bones, as you can see in the top here. And there were also some cups played. And at the end, the people that play those games, they really understand probabilities, and they really understand how you can win and how you can lose, and how they have better probabilities than you that play the game, maybe with street players or something like this. And then in the 17th century, there were two scientists, Laplace and Fermat, that the first time discussed in a more scientific way about about gambling and what is scientifically behind the thing, and about scientifically defined things like probabilities. And there was a paradoxon of Chevalier-Lemaire. I don't want to go into detail here, but it was about dices, and there was a different probabilities if you played with one dice or with two dices. You can read about more on Wikipedia, but they talked in letters very often about the paradoxon, and we call it the beginning of the theory of probabilities. So that was more or less the starting point of data science. And when we have a closer look at data science and we ask ourselves, what is the science behind data science, you stumble around topics like probabilities, like, so what does it mean? It means how is the probability to win or lose things, or to reach a certain goal. And pattern recognition means, is there a correlation, for example, between customer income and the age, or customer income and the salary, things like this. So correlation between data. Analytical variance is one thing, machine learning. Simulation means like what happens to the business processes if certain parameters change, like prices, things like this. So companies doing simulations quite often, and very common and in the last months very often used topic is prediction. So everybody wants to predict the future. And prediction is more or less about how certain things behave in the future. And that's all around data science. It's more or less all around those topics. And when we have a look, how does data science fit to classical BI, then BI is more or less, in BI we have a look most or less into the past. So what happened with our data in the past? So more or less, most of our reports have a look in the past. So what happened in the last quarter, in the last month, in the last year. Data mining is more about understanding certain patterns why things behave like this. So what are the certain behaviors, what are the correlations between our data? And prediction is if you combine the why with your data. So when you find the patterns that you were looking for and you apply that with your data, then you can predict what happens in the future. And an example where you can use it is, for example, the weather forecast. And what we can see here is the weather forecast for the next 15 days. And you see this is the weather for Hamburg, and today we have Friday, and the forecast for today is 18 degrees. And what you can see here is the forecast for the next 15 days. And the most interesting thing is the gray area here, because this is a variance. And it tells us how confident they are about the temperature. And as you can see, up to Monday, it's very precise. So they really know, or it's Tuesday, they really know that on Tuesday we will have 25, 26 degrees. But then it's more or less guessing. So it can be 28 degrees or it can be 20 degrees, something in between. So, and this is a typical example for forecasting combined with variance, combined with prediction. And the question is now, what do customers do with this? So we don't do weather forecasts. What do normal customers do with topics like data science? And the classical example, I think more or less everybody knows this, is Walmart. Have somebody heard of this analytics with beer and Pampers? Yeah, okay. So some of them know. And so Walmart, they did it since years. So I think Walmart started the first data warehouse in the 70s. And they did some analytics about what customers buy. And this is what typically Amazon is doing. People who buy this also buy this. But years ago, they didn't have the techniques to do things that we can do now. And they were just analyzing the bills that you get out of the cash desk. And they figured out that there is a correlation between beer and Pampers. So people who buy a lot of beer also buy Pampers, and they didn't know why. So they sent people to the cash desk and asked. So they figured, he's buying beers and Pampers, so why? Why do you buy this? And the people gave some answers, but it's not the clear reason why. So they just, okay, I need to buy Pampers and I like beer, so I buy a beer. So you just understand that people are doing this, but you don't understand why. And if you ask the people, they cannot explain. So they sit together with scientists, and they found an explanation. And the point here is that typically this pattern fitted to young fathers. And the point here was like they came home after the day, and they had to bring in Pampers at home. And then typically the wives, after a long day, they take the baby and say, "Here, now it's your turn." Yeah. And the first thing, you have to change the nappies, and so they had to use the Pampers for the babies, and the beer was the reward at the end. So and this was the psychological reason that the scientists found out why people are doing this. Yeah? But just by asking, you cannot find this thing. They only recognized the pattern. Visa is the next very common and very known example. In the US, it's very common that you have partner cards. So you share one bank account, but both have so each has an account. So that the man and the woman, they have their own card, their own credit card, but it's all the same bank account. And also in America, people use credit cards very often. So that Visa has a very good data basis to analyze what people are buying and why people are buying things. And what they figured out that they can predict based on the data when people will divorce within the next 5 years. So based on what you are buying and what couples are buying, they can decide when people will get divorced. And the reason why this is very important for them is that divorce is the highest risk for privacy insolvency. So they want to understand when this can happen. So it's a kind of risk management. And if this happens, they can lower the limit that you probably have on your credit card. So they can react before you know it, right? And we have also customers in Germany that I work with, and we were also talking about what would be cases, and with marketing people, they all love social analytics, right? But this customer, they are producing cosmetic products and washing powders, things like this, and they want to do social analytics. And then we were asking ourselves, do people Twitter or Facebook about your products, right? And when you imagine you have a product to color your hair, right? And if you are not so satisfied, then the question is, do you make a photo and put it to the world? And say, well, don't buy this product because it doesn't look good. Next thing is, do people Twitter about washing powder, right? Is that really what people are doing? So, and we said, okay, we don't know, we can check, right? But we were asking ourselves, is that really something interesting? So, social media and social analytics is an interesting thing, but it, from my understanding, does not fit to every customer. But anyway, we did it. So what we choose here is 3 products on the market. So Persil and Spee are German products for washing powder, and it's what the company produces. And Ariel is the competitor on the market. And what you can see here is Twitter data, how much people tweeted about these products over time. And when you see this, and our customer also saw the graphic, first impression would be, oh my goodness, everybody talks about the other products, but not about ours. So that would be the first reaction. And if you have a look at the data, then you find that Ariel is not only a washing powder, right? There are people who are named Ariel, there are universities called Ariel, so it's really hard to analyze the meaning of Ariel in the context. So social analytics is really not an easy thing, and speech recognition, speech analytics is a very complex topic. And in the first example here, this is really a Twitter feed where people are talking about the product itself. So no meaning, right? So you can grab the data, you can store it in your Hadoop cluster, you have a lot of data, but the question is, what is the value of it, and can you analyze it? Are you able to find out, are you able to do text analytics? Typical other areas where you can use data science is risk management. It's not it's very common for banks and for other areas like insurance companies. And other things are dynamic pricing, sales prediction, a lot of things where you can use it. I didn't mention the word big data in the beginning, and it was very, and I did it for a certain reason, because I don't want to drag the attention from the hype and talk a little bit more about the details. Nevertheless, I want to give you an idea where does it, the thing of data science or analytics, some people call it advanced analytics, where does it fit to the big data picture? And when we talk about big data, I don't want to start now a discussion what does big data mean, but typically we come from the structured data side. So we have structured data from SAP systems, from other source systems that we analyzed in data warehouses for years. And what people tell us now, that there is a value in unstructured data, videos, pictures, text, something like this. And if we can combine this and analyze it, then this is called big data. And when we have a look at the typical big data architecture, it starts with the storage. So we need to store the data somewhere. And for structured data, we use data warehouses or databases in the past, and we will use it also in the future. And for unstructured data, we could use things like Hadoop. Then we have a kind of data preparation layer, how we can analyze this kind of data. So we have SQL on the structured side, and we have MapReduce on the Hadoop side, or other things like Peak or Hive. And we have typical analytical tools like Excel, Power Pivot, ClickView, or others. And then we have more analytical tools like SPSS from IBM, Evolution Analytics, R, and DAS. So this is a typical big data architecture that I see at the customer side. And one statement, because I often hear it from Cloudera, that tried to tell us that we don't need data warehouses anymore. There was a nice statement from Facebook some weeks or months ago, and they also figured out that Hadoop is not the best solution where you can do everything, and they realized that they were using the wrong technology for a certain kind of problem, so they also started to just build a normal data warehouse. People thought that nobody will do this anymore, but still also Facebook uses normal traditional data warehouses for structured data and Hadoop for other kind of analytics. So we still stay with data warehouses for a long while. Some words to R, because if you deal with data science and data analytics, you often come around R. And R is very often used at university. University is an open source platform for statistical computing and also for graphical analytics. And it's widely used in the statistical community. The important thing is that everything here happens in memory. It's very fast, but it's hard to scale, and we will talk about scalability later on. And we have now around 5,000 packages about functionalities that come along with R. So, but these packages are developed or coded by statisticians or mathematicians. So sometimes it's not the fastest or best performing engine, but still you can do analytics very easily. And some samples to R, I have it here. I don't want to go too much in detail into R, but it's more or less a kind of coding. So you have an R language where you need to code your analytics, and then at the end you can get nice graphics like this. So like plots or any kind of graphical things. But you can do, you can apply analytical functions very easily. Much harder than it would be in SQL Server. So the next thing is how to start in projects. And what I want to phrase here is that problems that we know from the classical BI world, where we analyzed already data, they don't go away. So with big data or data science, the complexity of system constantly grows, and this does not go away. The amount of data grows, it does not go away. So there are a lot of basic rules that also apply to big data or data science. So, and the question is now, how do we approach projects? And there is a problem in data science about how you're going to start. And the first option would be classical deterministic. So you go to your business people, you ask for requirements, and then you try to solve the problem. But the point here is, and there's an example from a professor from, I think from Portugal, who did an analytics on the GDP of certain countries. And what he analyzed is how is the correlation between the products that were produced in that country, like example Spain or UK or something like this. And what would you guess how many products he's analyzing in that very complex algorithm? Any guesses how many different products are analyzed here? It's only 500. So only 500 different products are analyzed here. If you think about that customers that have supermarkets, they want to analyze 100,000 of products. So this can be very difficult. And the other thing is that you don't know where to go. So finding patterns is a more evolutionary thing, and that's why there is a second option. You can start projects. Is like, how does Mother Nature deal with complex linear systems, non-linear systems, and it's about evolution, so trial and error. And this is an approach that we typically see with data scientists. They just experiment. So they try something, and only if they find what they were looking for, then they apply it to a more wider, to more wider data. And I have an example where this has been used, and what you can see here is not a candlestick. It's an injector to produce washing pellets. And it's from the company Unilever. And they had the problem that they have those injectors where they put in fluid washing, things, and then this injector, it creates these small pellets that you can see here in this picture. And the problem they had with this injector that it produces a lot of waste, so they had to filter it out, and it was very poor quality. And then what companies typically doing, they ask for a consultant company that is helping on their problem. And then they spend some months, a lot of money, but they didn't solve the problem. And then additionally, they started with some scientists, and what they did is they also didn't know how to produce the perfect injector, but they just started to define this injector in a kind of mathematical structure. So they defined a formula, and what they just did in the variables, they just randomly iterated over those variables. So they first of all choose the easiest form, and then they did some iterations, and then based on that, they used the best outcome, and then they took it for the next iteration and also randomly iterated through the next cycles. And after 45 cycles, they came to the best injector that Unilever used for the production. And the interesting thing is that nobody knows before that this would be the best injector. And also now people even don't understand why does it has to look like this. And the interesting thing that can be applied here, and that we also see within the modern technology, is that we have now technologies that help us to speed iterations. So we can apply this pattern of trial and error, and we can apply it within our project. So we don't have to spend much amount of money from the beginning, so we start small and then we can grow. And this pattern that I want to explain a little bit in more detail, I call it a laboratory and factory. And the idea of this is a process model to iterate very fast and find new patterns very quickly without spending too much money. And the laboratory clearly is for the data scientist. So it's for the person who is able to, can understand the data and who can find those patterns in the data. And an efficient laboratory could look like this. So we have different kind of data sources. We have structured data sources like databases, SAP, Oracle, other things. And we have probably more unstructured things like weblogs, Twitter data, Facebook, something else. And for structured data, we understood that data warehouses are very well known and they're very helpful, so we can still stick with SQL Server. And for the unstructured data, we can go for Power Query. So we don't need to create a Hadoop cluster just because we have some text data. We can also just take Excel in order to do some analytics. And that's what I want to show in a short demo. So I'll duplicate my screen. Right. So what I have here is, because we are Germans and Germans love cars, I try to grab some Twitter data about cars. And what I here have is a folder What I here have is a folder with lots of Twitter data about different cars. And it's just pure text. It's what we grabbed about several days about different cars. And we just want to analyze it. And it's normal Twitter data. And what I can do now is I can just import it into my Excel, and I use Power Query for this. I specify the folder where all the data is in, and it analyzes the different flat files. And I think we have around 50 different files with lots of Twitter data. And now we can start structuring our data. And what I do here is I split the data by delimiter. I have a semicolon in here. And what we find here is the tweet itself. We find the tweeter. We find the date. And I split this again because here I have things like Audi A1, Audi A2, and I just want to have the brand and the type separated. So I split it again. I use space. And type. Because I'm not so interested in timestamps, I convert this to the day. I want to have just the date. Okay, I just filter some data that are not quite correct, and now I'm done. So what I can't do is really tone analytics. So like, is it positive or negative? There are easy solutions, like they just see if there is a word in there like bad, then it's a bad tone or a negative tone, and if there are words in there like yeah, then it's a positive tone. What about double? So it's not bad and it's not so good. So there are a lot of things where tone analytics is really difficult, right? And we in Germany, we have things like sarcasm, and that doesn't make things easy. So I can get my Twitter data now from my folder. I load it to my data model. It now goes to Power Pivot in memory, and then I can do some analytics on there. So very, very easy. I can just insert a pivot table. I choose my data model, and I can just start do some analytics, like how much people tweeted about in a certain amount of time. I probably insert a chart. Let's take a line. Okay, and we have the date here, and we get the print here, and we can add a filter like slicer on a brand, and we just choose some German brands like Audi, BMW, and yeah, something like this. And here we see that that Audi is more popular than BMW, right? So people tweet more about Audi than BMW. I don't know why I don't see here the others. Normally Mercedes sucks, and this could be that old people typically drive Mercedes, and or older people, and I don't know how much they use tweets or normal or new kinds of new kind of technologies like Twitter. So very easily, how we can also analyze things like texts, also within Excel without any Hadoop cluster. And this is how you can start. So you play around with the data. You don't need the whole data set. So you find out the data set that is good enough, and then you just got to start. And if you find something where you say, oh, this looks very interesting, then you can apply this to a larger data set. And this is what I call the factory. So if we have really found something interesting, and now I have to switch to presenter mode. So if we found something really interesting, we can put it to our factory. And the factory is where we want to run the analytics on the whole data set, right? And this at enterprise scale, more or less in real time, that was what customer demands. And this also on an operating process. So you want to run it, I don't know, every hour, every week, every night, something like this, and it needs to be integrated. It's not a standalone solution, so it will be normally integrated in the normal data preparation process, and probably the results, the predictive measures, will be also integrated in your data warehouse. But you don't want to do this first. You first want to understand the meaning of the data and what you can learn from your data and which pattern you can find, and then you apply this to the factory. And the question is now, how does a factory look like? And in this case, Microsoft has a product out there which is called PDW for large-scale data warehouses with a feature called Polybase. And we have HT Insight to scale for unstructured data. And at the end, we can use still Excel, but we can also use predictive tools like R on top. So let's have a look how this looks like. I don't have a PDW here, but we can do this also with no PDW, more on a manual step. And what I have here is one node Hadoop cluster. And so it's HD Insight on my virtual machine. And if you open up Hadoop, you get those nice interactive graphical user interfaces. And what I did here, I just loaded my Twitter data to the Hadoop cluster. And we can shortly browse to it. So these are the same text files that I store now in my Hadoop cluster. I can add some more files, some more data. And as you can see, it's our text that we have already had before. And how we can get this in there, in our case, we used normal integration services. So you can have a data flow where you can grab the Hadoop API and you can query the Hadoop API in order to get the data. You store the data in flat files and you then use the normal HDFS console queries like HDFS fsput in order to load the data to your HDFS cluster. So pretty easy, and this is how you can transfer the data from Twitter into your Hadoop cluster. And then additionally, what we have here is some statistical data that we get from the statistical department of the German government about how much cars have been sold in the last month. So these are pure statistical, traditional, structured data. And what we want to do is we want to combine them. So we have the classical structured data in our relational database, and now we try to combine them with Hadoop data in order to find some trends. And what I did here is you can create a Hive table on top of this Hadoop. Like we create an external table where we describe the structure of our data as we did in the Power Query, and just say the first column is the tweet, the second column is the tweeter, then we have the date, you know. And then we can query this kind of data by just sending a select statement to these Hive tables. I don't want to go in too much detail about now Hive, but I just put it here and we can execute it. And then we get so we have the raw data in the Hadoop cluster, so every line of tweet about a certain car, and what we just want to have is a very combined subset of the whole data, like how much do people tweeted in a certain time about a certain car. So I don't want to have the single tweet, I just want to understand how much people tweeted about in a certain time frame. I can just query the data. And you can also create an SSIS package where you just do an ODBC connection to this Hive table and just send this query to Hive. And here we created a ODBC connector and we just send it the same query to the Hive table, and then you get the results back in SSIS and you can just store it in your normal data warehouse. So we store the results of the Twitter analytics of our Hadoop cluster in the normal data warehouse so that we can use the KPIs in a more efficient way. So the outcome is then stored in the data warehouse. This is what we did here. It's German, so like model and Neuzulassungen. These are the KPIs that we have, and at the end we can build a nice dashboard like this where we see how much cars have been sold, and you see VW is on top, so most of the people in Germany buy VW, and followed by Audi, BMW and Mercedes. And what we can see here is the results of the Twitter analytics. So as you see here, Audi and VW are clearly the winners, so these are the types where people often tweet about. And what you can learn now here is, like, if you are a marketing department, then you know what is the community that you probably want to reach. And if you are a marketing department for Mercedes, then the question is, how much do you use those new kinds of social medias in order to place marketing or place adverts if people are not so in there, right? So, and what we see here is like a combination how we can use Hadoop combined with SQL Server, or in PDW it's a little bit easier. I think Henk showed some examples how this is going to be with Polybase. Okay. The next thing is how we can scale. How can we scale? I already mentioned that the problem with R is that R and most of the analytical engines are in-memory engines, and they have a problem with scalability. So we have now data that does not fit into memory anymore, and we also have computing systems like Hadoop or MPP systems that are multi-node systems. And those technologies, they cannot use those multi-node systems, and they have a limitation in how much data you can put into in order to analyze. And that are the weaknesses and the limitations that most of the customers have, that they found interesting patterns, but they cannot apply it on the large-scale data set. Typically what they do is then sampling, so they sample the data. Like, I don't need to apply to the whole data set when I understand the data and I can sample the data. So sampling is an option to work around, but it is a workaround. And what we did together with the customer was a kind of contest where they choose the typical vendors in the market to do some analytical benchmarks. And we worked together with Microsoft against SAP HANA, against Exasol, Oracle with so Netezza is from IBM and Oracle is Exadata. So Oracle came with Exadata, SAP started with HANA, and IBM with Netezza. And we try to solve different analytical use cases on that different environments. And these were different SQL queries, like simulations, but also predictions with R. So they had a lot of R code where they do prediction. The customer is an energy provider, and what they want to do is like predict your energy consumptions within 15 minutes. So the idea is like you come to the homepage and say, okay, I paid this amount of energy costs last month. So is there any offer that you can provide to me? And what they do is they analyze within 15 minutes your consumption of energy, and then they predict what is the consumption in the future. And based on this, they offer you certain packages like please buy 3,000 kilowatt because it's cheaper than what you do now. So they have some requirements on predictive analytics, and the point here is that we are not able to run R analytics within our database. So we are not able to run R within SQL Server, we are not able to run R within PDW. So we have two separated solutions. So we use the PDW for the relational queries and for the data storage, and we used a different system based on Revolution Analytics that is able to scale R. And Revolution Analytics is a provider based in Seattle, and they started to rewrite R libraries to make it more efficient, and they also have solutions to scale out. So you can have different servers and run Revolution R, so it's a special version of R on top of it, and so we have the option to scale. And what we had here, we had a 40-core server with 2 TB of RAM, so the largest box that you can get in an SMP environment, and we had the PDW. So a little bit background about Revolution Analytics. As I said, they try to evolution R, and they also give something back to the open source community, not everything. For some things you have to pay something. But they have also enterprise and community products. And as I said, they have a scale-out solution based on the Windows HPC cluster, and also in the future based on Hadoop. So you can run your R code on a scaled Hadoop cluster. Question is now, how did we handle our data? So the whole data preparation happens on the SQL side. So we need to prepare the data that we need in order to do analytics. And then we needed to transfer the data to the Revolution Analytics server. And it goes via the network, and it uses a standard ARM ODBC connector, and this is 10 megabytes per second. So really slow. So this is it's the first thing that you have to play around. When you combine these things directly and you use the normal ODBC connector, it's really, really slow. And when you do very quickly, very often those kind of analytics, then this is really a pain. So next option, you do normal flat file export. So you take your data from the data warehouse, you export it to a certain special flat file format that R can better work on it, and it's 8 times faster. So you get 80 megs per second, but still not so fast. And then we run all the analytics on the separate server. And the results so far, so the goal was to do prediction for 30,000 customers within 5 minutes. That was the goal that the customer had with his solution. And for every customer, you get around 50,000 rows. So 50,000 30,000. This is the data set. And we were able to do 7,500 customers in 5 minutes. So not that good. And the outcome would be that you have to buy 4 of those servers. So you don't need the 40 cores. We were not able to utilize all the 40 cores. So half of it is good enough. But still you need different servers in order to scale the analytics side, right? So the relational side is very quick, but the analytical side is really hard. And it's very hard to scale. And it's also very hard to analyze where do you spend the time. The ODBC driver that Revolution Analytics provides, it's a faster version of it, but it does not work with PDW because it uses kind of triggers, and PDW does not support triggers. So you stick with the normal ODBC driver, and this is very slow, as I already said. So the workaround is to play with flat files. So Revolution Analytics is a very fast engine, so that was what the customer said. So if the data is on the system, then the analytics is very fast, but the data transfer and the data preparation is a little bit of hurdle. So other solutions that we see in the market, and this is what the other vendors used, and they showed better results, are in database. So there's a kind of battle in the market where the hardware vendors fear a little bit about the positioning of their databases in the big data game. And so they try to bring the analytical capabilities down to the database. And this totally makes sense because if you have a lot of data, we cannot afford to move data around. So data movement is really expensive, also in the future. And that's why the hardware vendors started to put R into the database so that you can run your normal R code within your normal relational database. And Teradata is working on it, Netezza is already providing this, also like Exasol and Oracle. The solutions are differently, so even if they say we have R capabilities, at the end you have to closely have a look how do they work. Exasol is using the memory for this, so they are still limited in scale. Oracle, for example, they just put all the data to a flat file and just say, okay, this is my memory. And so they are able to handle more data, but very slow. Other techniques that we see is like R on Hadoop. So we have seen SAS, for example, who announced that they have a relationship in order to provide SAS analytics on Hadoop. And we also see Microsoft working on functionality where you can use the Hadoop cluster as a scale-out solution in order to scale your R code. There's an open source framework out there, it's called R Hadoop, where you can use it, or you can use Revolution Analytics that also provide the scale-out for Hadoop. Other solutions in the market are service providers like BigML or Kaggle, and also Microsoft is working on this. I thought it was still under NDA, but there was a session this morning, so I think I can say some words about. So there's a product, Microsoft will offer a product for us in the cloud area. The code name is called Project Passau. There was a session this morning where they introduced this, and it's a kind of workbench for the data scientists where he can start playing around with the data and then also scale out based on HD Insight. Other versions and other vendors in the market like Splunk or Datamare, they offer also solutions also combined with hardware. So as you can see, the data analytics market is still evolving. We have technologies like R that are commonly used, but they have their disadvantages, and then we have different solution offerings in the market. For me, it's not very clear where this will go to, but I think it's very interesting to follow those, to follow the things that happen currently in the market, and I think it's more or less a game of the big vendors, and let's see how Microsoft will perform in this. That's it for now. Thank you so much, and if you have questions, feel free. I'm here for a while.